Hey guys, my name is Alex, and this is the 22nd installment in my video project series thing, Kingly Endeavors, in which I intend to read all of Stephen King's novels in chronological order and to hopefully post a video a week about them. Obviously, I'm still not quite keeping up with the weekly thing, but I am reading the novels in chronological order. I'm totally back in this. We're gonna finish it. I'm in my room right now, and like the rest of my apartment, it reeks of dog piss. My roommate just got another dog, and while that dog is very good about not like going in the house, my dog, it's like triggering something in my elderly 16-year-old dog that he now needs to piss on everything all the time. It doesn't stop, and it's apart from just being annoying because I have to constantly be like, I use like a roll of paper towels to clean up urine every couple days. But even apart from that, what's frustrating is just like how confounding it is. Like that he will a river of piss, a river. He will pee some amount of urine that just kind of defies your the size of his body, and then as I'm cleaning the river, he will piss like a small puddle like 4 feet away. So I'll go and I'll clean that little puddle of piss, and while I'm cleaning that puddle, he will be in another part of the apartment with another river. I don't know how he does it. I tried this strategy for a little while where like I would pick up his water bowl after he was done eating so that like he wouldn't just have like frequent access to it. Didn't change a thing. This dog's bladder is like some kind of like treasure you would take on a quest through the desert, because it just doesn't, there is no maximum capacity of liquid it can hold. I love him, he's great, but like, Jesus Christ. Anyways, the book I'm talking about today is Insomnia. I read this book for the second time about 8 months ago, and I first read it about 15 years before that. And it was a really weird experience because having not read it in 15 years, obviously a lot of it was like kind of, I didn't remember a lot of it. So there's that obvious thing of like, this is familiar and not very familiar. I don't know what's happening next, but oh yeah, I actually remember that. But then the other really weird thing about reading it again for the first time 15 years after I first fell in love with it in middle school is that I'm reading it, and yes, it's triggering some of my memories, but I'm realizing at the same time that it's not good. It's got its redeeming parts, and I think it's got the same issue that the Tommyknockers had and Needful Things had. This book, like those two, is in the 600 to 800 page range, and it's really exhausting, it's really indulgent, scenes go on way too long, but it's frustrating because you know that there's like a really good 300 page book in here. The book is about a guy named Ralph who, at the beginning of the book, like so many characters in Stephen King's post-alcohol days, has just lost something. In this case, it's his wife, and if I remember correctly, I think she died of a brain tumor. And so we see for a little bit kind of like the days they spend together, knowing that her death is on the way, and like how they're trying to pretend it's not really on the way, and also kind of resigning themselves to the reality. And then after she dies, suddenly Ralph stops sleeping. And the way that the insomnia creeps up on him, where he's sleeping less and less every night, like those first, I don't know, 70 pages, that is the best part of the book. It's really quick, it's got some funny stuff, it's got Stephen King's more distinct voice, and it demonstrates sort of the strengthening prose that we're seeing, the more artful prose that we're seeing from Stephen King after sobriety. By after sobriety, I mean once he's gotten sober, not like post-sobriety, like he fell off the wagon. What I think is also unique to Stephen King's sober books is that there's like a degree of tenderness that he never quite achieved in the earlier stuff. Like, I think everything leading up to 1990, which is when Stephen King got sober, demonstrates like a really staggering display of imaginative fertility. But then once he's gone through the hardship of confronting and overcoming his addictions and seeing how he's hurt his family, I think it sort of broadened his capacity for empathy, sympathy, whatever. But so these post-drinking, post-drug books are a lot more sensitive. So that stuff is really compelling. And yeah, once the insomnia sets in, he starts seeing like auras around people and then like light trails. It's kind of like what you see when you're tripping on acid, like the trailing of everything, everyone's shirt colors. I haven't dropped acid, I promise. It like scares the shit out of me. I feel like I've read too many things about people dropping acid and then they're never the same. And then in my freshman year of college, I had a next door neighbor who claims to have taken way too much acid, and he says that like every now and then he'll be staring at the wall and then like a shadow will kind of start closing in and the shadow will have like fingers in it. I feel like all of my friends have really interesting drug stories and I don't. I did once like, I once like smoked pot with this I was on a date, and we had just gone to dinner and we were going to a movie at this little art house theater here in Miami. I actually think it was like a midnight screening of Poltergeist. We went to dinner and then like we had a few drinks and we come to the theater and she like pulls a joint out of her bag and she's like, oh, can we like step into the alley so I can take a quick hit? Which was a terrifying thing, but like I didn't want to seem like a coward or anything. And it was like 11:30 or 11:45, so like no one was really around. So I was like, okay, sure, let's go. So we go into an alley and we're just kind of continuing the conversation we'd been having as we were walking to the theater. And then she takes a hit of a joint and she's like, here, do you want some? And again, I don't really smoke, and also I had just been drinking and I ate a lot, so I was concerned about like how it was going to influence me. But I didn't want to seem like a coward or a square, and so I was like, yeah, sure. And so like I took a big hit, and that's another thing. If you don't do it regularly, you don't know like how to modulate. Like you don't know what's like a big hit. Like I didn't realize I had taken a big hit until she was like, wow, please don't smoke all my weed. But so whatever, I hand it back, and that was all I had. And then we go into the theater, and we're standing in line waiting to get something from the concession stand, because obviously now, having taken a hit, like there's candy on display and it's beautiful and appetizing. But then we're standing in line, and I start feeling really, really dizzy, and I was like, oh, I think I have to go to the bathroom. So I walk to the bathroom, and I just barely like reach the stall, and I just start puking my guts out. I'm puking, and then like it's totally done, and I feel fine. I feel elated. I feel like lightened. There's the endorphin rush, and I was like, I thought that was, you know, great timing. Unfortunately, I now have vomit breath, but great timing. She won't know a thing, and that we're good. So I walk out of the bathroom, and I find that she is upstairs where the bathroom is, and she's like waiting for me in the hallway. She's like, oh, you really didn't look so good in the line, so I wanted to make sure everything was okay. And as I open my mouth to say, everything's fine, I end up lurching forward, and a geyser of vomit just sort of plops into the carpet. My stomach was like Mango's bladder. I'd like unspooled way more vomit than my body, I would have thought my stomach could hold in the first place. And she's gaping at me wide-eyed, and she's like recoiling, and she's shocked, like she's concerned, but also obviously mortified because there's other people around. And so then I appear to be done puking, and I was like, okay, this is really embarrassing, but at least it's done. At which point I immediately fell unconscious onto the carpet. And that's the end of the story. Just kidding. I wake up about 45 seconds later with a ring of people standing a good distance away from me, and I find that while I was unconscious, I had continued to vomit. And that's obviously a very dark thing, because like I could have died if I was on my back and alone or whatever, but obviously I would not have smoked alone but yeah, I was on my stomach, and everything kind of turned out fine. And much to my surprise, we actually did not go on a second date. And actually there was this other time in college, I'm gonna get back to the book, I promise, but there were these two girls, Cassie and Emily, and they lived together, and like we were friendly, but I had a big crush on Cassie. And one day Cassie called me, and she was like, hey, do you want to come over to our apartment and smoke? And in my mind I was like, well, I want to come over to your apartment, like I'm not really a smoker, I'll go like have a drink. But again, I didn't say that because I've got this perpetual fear of being like boring or square, even though deep down in like my tummy of tummies I know that I'm boring and square, and it's fine, like I love it, I think I'm cool. But then when I'm around people, particularly girls that I'm trying to impress, I have to be like, oh, I'll do anything that you invite me to do. Dating is like the one arena of my life where I worry about like sabotaging myself somehow. Because like if I'm on a first date and I'm really attracted to the person, and then she's like, oh, can we stop here real quick? I just want to hold up the CVS. I'd be like, okay. But anyway, so Cassie and Emily invite me to their apartment, and I go, and I'm like, okay, hey, and I'm like bracing myself because I don't know how I'm gonna react to the weed. Am I suddenly gonna be like super chatty or paranoid or weird? And I see the girls, like, they're putting on boots and stuff. And I was like, where are we going? Cassie says, oh, we're gonna go smoke in the nature preserve. So I went to a place called FIU down here in Miami, and they had like a massive nature preserve that they were very proud of. I don't know if it's still there. It's probably not still there. I would not be the least bit surprised to learn that they had like bulldozed it in order to build what should be a parking garage, but is not a parking garage. It's like a 70% commuter school, and they're trying to bring in more students, but they never build more parking. It's like opening a hotel with no beds. I don't understand how they... It's like if you were to build a bar, and you were so proud you had the biggest liquor display in town. It was like from liquors from Russia, Germany, whatever, and you had 4 cups. But so anyway, before I finish that story, I have to mention something about the nature preserve. There were these 2 black labs that walked around campus all the time. They were like super, super skinny, and like their coats were really fucked up. It was a black lab and a yellow lab. We called them Lemon and Chocolate. They were always slinking around campus. They were super shy, and they always seemed very timid around people, and everyone loved them. Everyone was constantly trying to ingratiate themselves toward these dogs. Everywhere you walked on campus, you would see some student standing like 10 feet away from a bush, and you couldn't even see inside the bush. Sometimes you couldn't even see the bush, but you knew that either Lemon or Chocolate was cowering in the bush. So every day you would see these 2 dogs around campus, sort of in different spots, but at night everyone knew that they were inseparable, and they were always together in the nature preserve. They loved the nature preserve. You could always see them sleeping around inside the nature preserve together, but usually they were frolicking and they were having a good time, which was great to see and kind of surprising because they looked so like unhealthy. But yeah, anyways, back to the story. So I get to their dorm, they're putting on their boots. I'm like, where are we going? And Cassie's like, we're not gonna smoke this weed here. We're gonna smoke this weed in the nature preserve. And her roommate Emily is all excited, like, yeah, we're gonna do illegal things in the nature preserve. Which I guess was kind of fine with me. Like, I didn't really want to smoke, and I just wanted to hang out with them. And the nature preserve was, to me, was fine. I enjoyed it. Much like Cassie, it was very pretty and it smelled nice. But I did have my hesitations about going into the nature preserve because, like, 2 months prior to this, there had been this issue where like there was helicopters all over the campus. Some guy with a gun had like assaulted someone on campus and then run into the nature preserve. And he just hid in there for hours with a gun. I remember trying to get on campus as it was happening, and there was a cop like stopped me. They had barricaded the road, and I was like, hey, no, I live here on campus. I have to get in. I got to park. He was like, no, sorry, sir, we can't like let anyone pass. He said, why not? What's happening? He said, well, you see, apparently someone did something illegal in the nature preserve. Also, I'd had this weird experience with a guy named Gil. That's another long story. I'm not going to digress into that one, but remind me someday I have to tell you the story about Gil. The very agitated and spontaneously violent black belt Gil, who also hung out in the nature preserve. But anyway, so we go into the nature preserve, and like we're walking and we're talking, and I'm a little like kind of on edge because I don't know if a cop is going to be here. Like, I don't want to do this shit in public. This is something I've noticed in life, is that a lot of people who smoke pot regularly, they get way too comfortable with it. Sometimes at like 11 o'clock, I'll be leaving a restaurant with a friend in like Coral Gables, and they'll like take out a joint and they'll light it and start smoking as we're walking to the car. And I'm like, you realize you're a criminal, right? And then what's super confounding and frustrating is if like you take them to task on the fact that they're lighting up a joint in fucking public, they like balk and they're like, oh, it's a stupid law anyway. Okay, Jerry, so like it's a stupid, like, so it just doesn't apply to you because you don't. Anyways, that's beside the point. But like Cassie and Emily were like super cavalier about smoking in public. I was not. I was very terrified. So we're talking, I'm being fidgety and paranoid already, and then we stop and they take a hit, and then I take a hit, and again, wow, Alex, that was a really big hit. If you don't do any kind of substance and then you're in the company of someone who does it regularly, it's probably wise to ask them before ingesting, how much is a stupid, dangerous amount that I should not do? Like, I'm nervous about even taking NyQuil because I'm always afraid that like I'm going to read the label, I'm going to administer whatever, and then I'm going to read the label a little bit closer, and it's like, oh, you drank too much, you're just never going to wake up. But so I take the hit, and I'm already paranoid, and apparently I took too large a hit, and I'm looking around like I'm afraid that there's a cop, and I'm listening, every bush, every flutter, every crack that I hear is like a SWAT team closing in. Finally, the girls start laughing and they can tell what's going on, and they're like, no, it's fine, relax, no one's here, no one's gonna smell, no one cares. Which I understand. Yeah, you're right. Nobody really cares if you're smoking weed in public. I can only think of one kind of person who cares if you're smoking weed in public. And that person has like gun and handcuffs. So anyways, they kind of talk me out of it. I settle down, I start to relax a little bit, and then at one point, I hear something, and I look to my right, and there, illuminated by the moon, are two pairs of glowing canine eyes, lemon and chocolate together at last. I didn't scream or anything, I didn't like grab them or whatever, I just sat there quietly and I looked at these dogs as they looked at me, and I lost my fucking mind. It was very like tight, stoic, lockjawed terror, panic. Weed is not for me. Like, I can't have a good time with that. Anyways, my point is that Insomnia is just not a particularly good book. I do regret that I let so much time elapse between the third Dark Tower book and then reading Insomnia, because I know there's a lot of things, like, for example, constant references to the Crimson King. Anyone who's watching this who's better acquainted with Stephen King's bibliography, someone who can tell me what exactly connects Insomnia to the Dark Tower, please do so. Because there's just something, it's hard to articulate, but there's something in the vibe of the book that feels like it's holding hands with something else. In the same way that Dolores Claiborne, I'm gesturing this way because it's propping up my camera, Dolores Claiborne is like a sister novel to Gerald's Game. Another one of the sort of ugly recurring things in Stephen King's body of work, and it happens like big time here in Insomnia, is violence against women. Not that violence against women is like this arena of life that you cannot touch in fiction. It's just that it seems like a very simple go-to thing that Stephen King resorts to when he wants to communicate a character's evil. Him some sort of, I don't know, it's remotely sympathetic perspective on life. Stephen King just kind of makes him like a semi-literate alcoholic woman beater. And there's a scene in this book, it's an action scene, and it's really well executed. I think it's one of the best action set pieces that Stephen King has ever written. This is something of a spoiler, so I'm sorry, but it's a scene where that sort of like villainous, misogynistic troglodyte character, he takes a machine gun into a sort of like a home for abused women, and he just fucking unloads and like murders a bunch of them. And when this book came out in, I think, 1997, I don't think it was probably, I'm sure that was like a really jarring, shocking scene, but reading it today in 2018, where it seems like just about every week someone does take a machine gun into a public place and like murder a bunch of people, that scene was like super fucking shocking. It's interesting because as upsetting as it is, it's also really well done, and it's really propulsive. I think it was like 30 pages or something, and it read like that. It ends with this weird, trippy, airplane fucking confrontation between Ralph and the villain. It's interesting, and you can, even though I don't think it works very well, you can kind of appreciate when you take a step back from it how much imagery Stephen King is effectively communicating in these pages. It's kind of like a sprawling action scene in a Marvel movie where we kind of take it for granted at this point because we've seen so many of them. Then if you like pause and dissect all of the cuts and you keep in mind that like there's a group of editors who are keeping track of like the direction in which these characters are running so that the audience can orient themselves in the scene. That shit is miraculous. And the fact that Stephen King was able to do it in prose, you know, one guy, he's doing this every year. I thought it's a really impressive Spider. It's a really impressive display of his talent. If you are one of these surprisingly many, like, die-hard Dark Tower completists who doesn't really have a serious interest in the rest of Stephen King's body of work, I do think you might find this to be integral to your understanding of the Dark Tower universe, given that I'm taking for granted that you probably have a more nuanced and rounded understanding of that universe than I do. As I'm recording this, I'm about halfway through the 4th Dark Tower novel, which everyone has told me is going to be the most difficult one for me personally because I don't like high fantasy, and holy shit, they were right. I'm reading the book and it's propulsive and it's good, it's well done, but I just hate it. Anyways, that's it for me. This went on way too long. I'm sorry for all the digressions. Yeah, don't read this one. Or read it. I don't know. If you really like Stephen King, this is just a lot of him. See you later, constant reader. Thanks for watching.